DNA didn't come back and link you, and they didn't have anything else at that point. They had a problem. They had no evidence. So Naeem Jackson enters. Naeem Jackson falls apart, and then they run into a problem to where the only thing they had nothing. That if the motion to dismiss would have been filed, then
specific about that, okay, here's what happened with that.
Right.
Is okay. So they finally conceded, man, on the Naeem Jackson thing.
They
conceded he was an agent for the state, even though they don't want to admit it. Right, they didn't want to admit it outright, but they conceded, man, to get rid of him as a witness and get rid of all his statements, right? So they conceded to do that. We file a motion to dismiss because that means now you have no evidence, right? You're back to no evidence, right? Well, the day my case would have been dismissed, right? The very day, man, they would have ran out of time and my case would have been dismissed is the day they signed the deal with JoJo. So,
wow.
And you know how I found out?
How'd you find out?
I find out because Paula calls me up. She's crying and getting hysterical,
right?
Because when he signed the deal, they let him go, and they didn't bother to get a protective order for him.
Oh, Jesus! Wow.
So you have the victim in the case calling the supposed killer. You know what I'm saying? Freaking out because they let him out on the street. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I mean, it can't get any more insane. It really just can't.
Yeah, I mean I can't believe. I mean, well, it just shows you how. Listen, it was very clear. I think you point this out, which I have yet to air the Rory trial yet on.
Oh man, the Rory trial. Man. You want to talk about ineffective assistance of counsel? Man, his lawyer showed up with nothing but an empty notebook and a pen.
Yep.
Didn't call one witness on his behalf, not one.
Oh,
then he puts himself on the stand and she recuses herself, man. She doesn't ask him questions because, man, she has ethical concerns.
Yep.
Man, that guy, man, look, while all the evidence says Rory Wilson, man, is the guy who committed this crime. That's true, right? But here's the point. That guy deserved a fair trial, and he did not get one. He's guilty of sin. In my opinion, he's guilty of sin. You know what I'm saying? But he still deserves a fair trial. If we're not going to do it right, then why do we bother to do it?
Now, Ty, do you have a theory? We played the Gabriella trial and we talked about the 911 call, and you said you have that maybe we can play at some point, or you can play it, right? Do you have a theory as to, because I had always thought that maybe she saw the truck or she was mistaken. Do you have a theory as to why that car would have pulled up and somebody got in that car? And who was coming out of the treehouse?
We're going to have to go a little bit into the whole Anethea thing.
Right.
Because, our theory, man, one of our theories for a very long time has been this. Everybody knew Anethea was a snitch, right? Now, she wasn't a county snitch, so again, it goes to the whole Haida thing, right? And actually, Paula did kind of confirm this for me a little bit at one point. We know that, man, according to the evidence, man, Anethea is the one who set up the crime and set it up with Rory and set it up with Travis, right? Sets up the crime, right?
Right.
The PI actually says Anethea set this up with Rory Wilson and a white guy.
Right.
Now, and there's an interesting point in that I figured out when I was in jail, and I can't believe it took me that long, but I figured out an interesting point with that too. But here's the point: so Anethea sets this up, right? Now, you saw even, man, on the night, man, when it happened, they brought her over the crime scene. They let her run around. They never treated her like a suspect. They take they take a statement from her and let her go. And she's 2 doors down from the crime, by the way, the night of the murder, right? And the cop calls her on speed dial, right? So why, she can't, not to talk ill of the dead,
right?
But, man, I mean, supposedly she's supposed to be a crack hoe,
right?
And, man, why is, man, a cop got a crack hoe's number?
That's right. Yep, absolutely.
Unless she's a snitch, Anyway, point being is, man, we do have the record showing the call that Anethea made to Captain Phelps, who was in control of Haida, which is a federal group, which, man, again, we believe she was a federal snitch, because there are 4 people who showed up at the treehouse that day who were, all, supposed major drug dealers, alleged major drug dealers. All 4 of them caught, Fed cases later. I actually ran into all of them in jail, and they were all there for Fed cases. Anyway, point being is, so we have Anethea calling Phelps, who's in charge of these federal investigations in Monroe County, right, at the time, right? So she calls Phelps about an hour before the crime goes down. Now, we also have those 2 squad cars that are sitting, in the CVS parking lot watching the treehouse for hours. You know what I'm saying? That tells me, man, they're just waiting for the robbery to go down. You know what I'm saying? They're just sitting there waiting for it to happen. Right? So they knew about it before it happened. That was my guess. You know what I'm saying? And that they had been surveilling the treehouse out of the CVS is basically, man. And Paula actually,
Right.
man, she actually kind of confirmed that a little. Paula, man, told me that there was one day they saw a bunch of guys go in the CVS with boxes. They never come out. Man,
Right.
they thought they were going to get busted, man. Fairly quick. Whatever. But man, the bottom line is, so that's the idea. Now they decide instead of man trying to stop the crime before it happens, they decide to let it go down. That way they can go ahead and bust the two guys, but not burn their not burn their undercovers if
Right.
they had it. You know what I'm saying? Because Gabriella's story would make sense then, because the guys in the black sedan, where did they go?
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? If they went the opposite way down Laurel, right? Well, who are they, and where did they go?
Right.
Right. Well, and man, my theory, this is just my opinion, is that those were undercovers trying to get the hell out of there before the cops showed up.
So your thoughts are that they actually had undercovers staged in the treehouse that were there, and when this whole thing went sideways, they get the hell out of there, and that's why they had to get rid of all the cameras, because they couldn't.
That's also why they had the man do this investigation in 5 days.
In 5 days.
So fast.
Gotcha.
That's why they needed to pick a scapegoat.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? Because man, at that point, they
and that lines up with why all of a sudden they're getting rid of all the cameras, because again, this whole case should have been very easily solved with all the cameras and everything.
It's actually a very simple case on the surface. It's when you start getting into all the crap that that's a whole different thing.
There it is.
But the bottom line is man, so man, our theory is Anthea calls Phelps, let her know it's going down. Now, here's the problem. They probably thought it was just going to be a simple robbery, and they could pick them up outside, and, man, their undercovers would be fine. They didn't know anybody was going to get killed, right? But that doesn't matter, because the felony murder rule is this. If you knew about that crime before it happened, and you didn't do anything to stop it, you're guilty of felony murder, and that would mean, man, Penny Phelps would have been guilty of felony murder at that point. You see what I'm saying? Because she knew about the crime before it happened and didn't do anything about it. You know what I mean? That would explain a lot of things. Now, is it true? Can't say.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's just a theory.
Right. But I mean, listen, it's a valid theory that I think is support that explains a lot of things. Because one of the things that's just mind-boggling in my mind is how could they? Why did they not get? We have Malone claiming she got the wrong dates. It's like this careless police work. And then remember, one of the things that they did in this case, which a lot of people don't know about, you tried to get it out in open court, is, the mishandling of evidence was the fact that Malone and I think Pitcher and all of them, they didn't book any of the clothes or any of the evidence. They actually kept it in their office. And that's why a lot of the physical evidence couldn't come in, and they were keeping that out because they were just choosing not to use it. But I mean, they did some really weird things. They didn't book it in the evidence room.
You're talking about 244 pieces of evidence that were mishandled, including DNA, including physical evidence, including videos. I mean, you name it. You know what I'm saying? And man, we actually had a guy on there who was he was from the forensic team, right? This guy named John Underwood. And when we depoted him, he was actually going to be one of my witnesses, by the way. But when we depoted him, he admitted it. He was like, my lawyer goes, he's like, well, if there were 30 pieces of evidence mishandled in the case, do you think that would, affect the outcome, towards the defense? It's like, well, that probably wouldn't help your client. He's like, well, what about 100? What if there was 100 pieces of mishandled evidence? How would that go? He's like, man, with that kind of evidence, that would just never happen. He's like, well, how about 244 pieces of evidence? He's like, well, in that case, man, they're just going to wrongfully convict that guy.
Right.
And man, sure enough, not knowing that, man, yes, man, that's exactly how he goes through. He's like, well, what if I told you that's how many pieces of evidence were mishandled in this case? And by the way, it's actually a higher number than that. That's just what, that's just what came out of that report. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know if I told you about this part.